Right. So we do need to also consider that as we are reading through the nouns, the less you know about a domain, the more you naively might choose that each noun is very important on its own, and that it should be represented as a class. The more you know about a domain, you might use some of that knowledge or experience on realizing that, wait a minute, no, this noun is actually just a field of some other class. That this noun, these 3, 4, 5 nouns are describing this other noun. So it might as well be a compound data type, right, that contains all the nouns. And so at the beginning, if you might come up with a naive representation where everything is a class, but iteratively decide to group several attributes into one class. So, for instance, the license plate, it depends the granularity in which you want to model something, depending how important this is for you, right? Apparently, professors are not important enough to have their own class. Just to use them is enough. Or here in the license plate, depending on what kind of aspect of the license plate you want to capture. Maybe you want to capture the size of the license plate, the color, the fonts, maybe what state it was issued, right? Whether it's one of the long ones in the European Union or one of the shorter ones here in North America. Whether it's bent or it's whatever, right? Or it might be enough to just have the license plate number, and that's it. So depending on the minutia or the amount of information you want to keep track of, you might decide that it's either an attribute or a class. Right? Obviously, if you have many attributes, then it needs to be its own class. If it's just a value, then it might be just an attribute of some other bigger class. Same thing with professors. We decided they're not important enough. It's just going to be an attribute in some other class. Same thing with departments. We represent nouns as class to keep an explicit list. So, for instance, a professor, if you do need to be able to edit the professors, a list of professors, create new professors, change their tenure, assign their office hours, blah blah blah, then obviously an attribute is not enough, right? And you have to go with use cases where to be able to implement those use cases, you need an entire class. Again, driven by the use cases. If nowhere in the use cases does it say that you need to maintain a list of professors and office hours and tenure and any of that, right? If you don't have any of those use cases, then perhaps the username for the professor is plenty. Okay? Again, your use cases should drive the design of the database, not any bias or prejudice you might have over a particular domain, right? That maybe you know too much about a domain, right? And you're projecting that experience, right, onto a problem that is not as complicated as you might expect. Yes. Again, it should be the requirements that are gathered from your client, specific client, that should drive the rest of the design, right? And then you interject your own experience, as you need based on that particular requirements. Here's a pseudo code for converting something that was a class into attributes or attributes into class. So, for instance, if you have a class that perhaps was not important enough to be its own class, and you want to convert it into an attribute, you need to look at that class who might have relationships with other classes, right? Like the license plate or the permit or the year, right? Or grade, right? Might have relationships with other classes. So you need to somehow, take that class and represent it, wherever it's being referred to. Right? So to take a look at any of these classes and look, to see what other classes are related to it, and you're going to remove the class, and then make add attributes in all those other classes where it was related. So in this example, we can take a look at the grade. In the enrollment, we can take a look at the year or the car model or the license plate, right? And remove the class, but represent them as attributes in the original class that they were being referred from, right? So year it has two relationships with students and the section. Professor has a relationship with section. We have the car model can be embedded in the permit. Right. So after removing all these, and the license plate and the car model into the permit, we come up with the class diagram we knew we're going to end up with all along, right? So we have the student, department, sections, enrollment, and whatnot. Yes. Yeah, and we knew that this design was correct from the beginning. Also, it might be that in your as you're reading through your through the description of the model of the project, right? And it might be that when you were jotting down all the meeting notes and you were interviewing all these folks, all the stakeholders, a lot of the information they're probably going to give you a lot of irrelevant information, right? That you might decide as you are designing this that you're not going to model that. Maybe that goes beyond the scope of the project. But they might also fail to tell you things that are relevant. Okay, that there might be a whole bunch of attributes or classes that were never mentioned, right? And they might not even mention that there's a user or a person, or right? They might take things for granted, right? That based on your experience, that well, yeah, don't you need a username and password or first name, last name? Oh, well, of course, right? You need all those things, and you will have to include those attributes or classes based on your experience. Like for instance, nobody told us that departments actually have names, or courses have titles, and students might have a username and password to log in, or date of birth, or any of that, or email, or whatever, right? Or social security number. We all pay taxes, and so all these missing attributes, you are also responsible for adding any of these missing attributes that are were taken for granted, right? Nobody told you, right? So you should put them in there. So any additional attributes. So here's department name, the course title, the graduation year, the student name, whatnot, and also go back and add all the connections, all the associations, and the cardinalities. Revisit those cardinalities. Does it make sense? The one to many, the many to many. Also, it might be that depending on what your particular vendor might support, how would you capture some of this information? Is it if it's multiple professors and you're just keeping track of the usernames, you might get away with representing them as just an array of strings, yes, in the parent class. But if you have many more attributes than just a username, then obviously you can't have an array. It has to be its own record in its own table.